Welcome to the High Performance Interviews. Today, I'm joined by Margaret Wood, who will be talking on the subject of menopause in the workplace. Margaret worked in the Inland Revenue until 2005 in a variety of roles, from working in a local tax office to being Programme Director for Women's Development, which she did for 11 years. As part of that role, she designed and facilitated a development program specifically for women and was also a licensed trainer for the Springboard Women's Development Program, both of which she delivered throughout the UK. Since 2017, Margaret's main focus has been the effect that menopause transition has on women's lives and careers, the impact not addressing it can have on organisations, their productivity, profitability, and reputations, and ultimately the UK economy. So, welcome, Margaret. It's fantastic to have you here on the High Performance Interviews. So, now we've learned a little bit about yourself. Just tell us why you've gone in specifically to the menopause side and helping women in business.
Well, Lucy, I've been working in women's development for 30 years, and it might sound strange, but in 2016, when the gender pay stats were revealed, and I realised that until the age of 40, there was very little difference between the pay of men and women. But then from 40 onwards, it started to widen. And then between 50 and 59, it virtually fell off a cliff. And I thought, this is really quite drastic. And I started doing some work on that. And then 2017, I went to a conference where menopause was raised for the first time I ever remember in open forum. And I then realized that if menopause happens for most women, the average is between 45 and 55 and can last between 4 and 8 years. I had like this light bulb moment when I thought, well, if that's when menopause happens, and it was also the time that the gender pay gap starts to widen, why haven't I thought about this before?
You
And
put two and two together, didn't you?
yes, I know it sounds a bit strange. And I realized that in all the development programs that I'd run with women I'd never heard menopause mentioned, which was
Interesting.
incredible.
Yeah.
I know we've spoken a lot more about it since, but I just never remember it being raised as an issue before.
Mm.
And so then I started to put together the gender pay gap statistics with the menopause and started to work on that and getting organizations to realize that there were things that they could do to improve the situation for women,
Fantastic.
of course.
Fantastic. So you're really honing in on organizations to help them to help women in the workplace. Is that right?
Exactly, yes.
Yeah.
My expertise isn't medical or clinical or anything like that. Mine is how circumstances affect women's lives and careers, the menopause being one of them.
Mm. Fantastic. Okay, so do you have a program that you go into workplaces and deliver, or how does that work, Margaret, for you?
Well, it's sort of a two-pronged approach. I've got either a 90-minute seminar, which is just me delivering the information, or a half-day workshop where we're getting input from either, if it's a women-only workshop, which I like to do for them, bringing out the issues that affect them directly. As I say, not in terms of the symptoms themselves and what they can do about it, but the impact of those symptoms on their demeanor, their performance at work, and this kind of thing. And then I also have another 90-minute or half-day workshop for line managers and HR professionals, but that's no reason why it couldn't be everyone in an organization, to explain to them how the menopause can affect them. It's not only the women and the line managers, but it can also be the partners or children or close relatives of any kind who are impacted by the changes that going through the menopause can have on women and how they suddenly find themselves living with someone that maybe they don't really know.
Yeah, because it can bring on some really big changes. Yeah,
Yes.
which can be scary for the women and very odd, like you say, for the people that they're living with and working with.
Mm.
Fantastic. Okay, so one question I have is there any kind of legal position for the organizations to take care of women in the workplace, or is there a legal position of the women if they're not being taken care of in the workplace? That's kind of a two-pronged question for you
Well,
there.
yes, the legal position in practice is that through the Equality Act 2010, menopause is covered under sex, disability, age, or gender reassignment. So it can depend on how the woman feels that they're being discriminated against or being treated less favorably. But the thing is, the number of cases being taken to tribunal is increasing. And an analysis of court records conducted by the Menopause Experts Group found that there were 23 employment tribunals citing menopause in 21, and that was an increase of 44% on the 16 cases seen the previous year. And by July 2023, there were already 14 cases. I tried to find the actual statistics for 2023-24, but couldn't really find them specifically. But you can see how it's maybe because women now feel that they can actually make claims and they're more confident about doing that. And perhaps the legal professions, sort of more in tune with what's happening and being taking cases on board. But there was a group of MPs who, even in 2023, were trying to get the menopause being treated as a protected characteristic, included with the others already existing. But the government made an announcement late 23 or early 24 where they thought that cases of menopause being claimed as discrimination fell under disability. Now, people have mixed views about that, but in February 22, an employment appeal tribunal concluded that Ms. Marie Rooney was disabled at all material times covered by her claims by virtue of her symptoms of menopause and combining this with stress and anxiety. And this marked the first time that this type of tribunal had decided that menopause symptoms could amount to a disability, and it set a legal precedent. So I think it's something that employers really need to consider. But in claims of discrimination or unfair dismissal, tribunals look favourably if menopause transition awareness raising has taken place, that there are policies and procedures that have been followed, and that there have been proactive support interventions which are accessible to everyone within an organisation. So that I think that combines the two really there, Lucy, that you've got the women being supported by the legal situation, but also organisations needing to realise that it really is serious in terms of how they need to address menopause within their organisation. In July 23, there was a British standard introduced called Menstruation, Menstrual Health and Menopause in the Workplace. It's a guide. And considering that the way we work is changing, however, in many cases, working practices are still not far from those that were designed at a time when women weren't equally represented
Mm.
in the workplace. And pressure's grown now, more women entering in the workforce. In fact, there's nearly half of the workforce is made up of women. And rather than them fitting into existing frameworks, the British Standard now gives really good guidance and a checklist on what organisations can do to help women and the organisation itself go through this time of change.
I was going to say, so it's really an advantage to the organization to have a look at that, to really take advantage of that themselves and understand and go through that checklist and support. Because if a woman does feel like she's been discriminated against within that parameter, you were saying earlier that the organisation are looked on more favourably by the court because they've already started to implement perhaps workshops like your own and other interventions, mental health in the workplace and all of those things. And by the way, if you want to get in contact with Margaret, all of her details will be in the description box below. So if you're thinking we could do that in our organisation, or let me find out more, then Margaret's details will be below. But yeah, so for that being an advantage to the organisation, it's not just about the women, it's about everybody. It's about lifting the whole organisation and having more understanding, isn't it, within that organisation?
Definitely.
Okay, so one other question I have for you is something, again, that you were speaking on earlier, and that development of women throughout their lives. So you were talking, you dropped in there, not just menopause, but menstruation. So at the other end, you've got women that are struggling with menstruation and the development through, and then you said the balance of the pay was huge, like it dropped off a cliff at one stage. And so what is that? What is the transition of that development, Margaret, that you see?
I think that there's been quite a lot of research in this, and what I'm quoting here was from some research that was done, I think in the early 2000s. Um, what this revealed was that there are actually three stages in women's careers, and the first one they called idealism, where when you've got young women who are starting work either from leaving school or having graduated, they don't really have many other considerations other than what they want to do. I know some young people are carers, and obviously they have to think about other people. And it's just that you don't really have to think about those kind of things when you're choosing your first job and what you want to do. And the focus at that stage is on career satisfaction and achievement and being successful. But then, as I explained earlier, when the menopause starts to hit, which can be from the late 30s when hormones start to change, because really what we're talking about here is puberty in reverse. So it's a gradual process. But certainly from the early mid 40s, women's hormones start to change and they start to experience some menopause symptoms, mainly at that stage, which could be depression, low mood, sleeplessness. But also around that time, they can find themselves as carers for elderly relatives. They've still got children, maybe teenage children who are going through either GCSEs, A levels, or just going to university.
So there's a lot of stress there, isn't
There's
there?
a lot going on during that time. And for a lot of women, they have to be pragmatic about their careers. Climbing up the career ladder, if that's what they've been wanting to do before, becomes much more difficult. And I've known women who've had to go part-time to try and balance everything that they want to give. They want to still continue doing a good job at work, but there are all these pressures outside. And so they go part-time, and some of them actually might leave altogether. But so far as work is done, they're doing what it takes to get the job done. All this can go on for several years. They're still interested. They're still wanting to be contributors to society, contributors to their families, and also thinking about their pensions, because not only is gender pay gap, but the gender pension gap. It's quite staggering, actually. When I first saw the statistics a couple of years ago, I think it was in 2022, that a woman's pension pot after a 44-year career is a third that of a man's. And yet
Oh
a
my
woman's life,
goodness,
yeah, I know. And yet a woman's life expectancy is longer.
it's longer. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Um,
crazy.
I know. I couldn't believe this when I saw it. Again, I've been working in women's development all these years, and I still get shocked by the things that keep cropping up.
Oh my goodness.
But once the elderly relatives are no longer around to be cared for, and the menopause symptoms are a thing of the past. And a woman wants to rejoin society, the workforce again, it's increasingly difficult. And yet this stage of career development was recognised and named reinvention. And women at this stage, the worries have gone. They've not got monthly hormone cycles that govern often their mood and the way they feel during this time. And it's liberating to not have that. They can focus on contributing to their organizations and the families and the communities they want to do things. I mean, a woman that I meet every week on a networking group, she's a community fundraiser for a charity. And the things that she does are tremendous. And she's got so much energy and wisdom and, experience that she can add to that particular job. And there's a phrase which I love and which I try and sort of incorporate into most things that I do. And it's from the American anthropologist Margaret Mead. And she said that there is no greater power on earth than the zest of a postmenopausal woman.
Ah.
Yes.
Yes. And that's where they get that really high performance because they've got the energy, they haven't got so much stress, and they can be that high performer. So looking at that transition and helping them to get through that transition as an organization, they're going to reap the benefits when she gets to that age, aren't they? And the menopause, like you say, is behind them, and thank goodness, because it goes on for a while. But also, as we were chatting earlier, you're saying the sooner that gets recognized and dealt with, the better. So if people are understanding it as they come through, even the women, because if you haven't gone through menopause, you don't know what menopause is like. Even as a woman, it's like you can't perhaps understand how somebody's behaving, even as a woman. But then when you're there, you're like, oh God, this is how I'm feeling. I'm depressed. I've got no lust for life. And the men will never understand it because they never have to go through it. But having that awareness and the awareness that you're bringing, I think is fantastic, Margaret. So I hope that our audience has got a lot from what you've given them and really understand what you do and how you can help organizations and the women within those organizations, but not just the women, the men as well, because it's the men understanding the
Yes.
women. Right. So before we head out here, is there any one thing that's left on your heart that you would like to share with our audience?
Yes, I think as you were speaking now, one thing I haven't said is that when women come to this reinvention stage, when they come to the postmenopause stage, they're not necessarily interested in promotion. What they're interested in is sharing their wisdom and knowledge and expertise with other people. And the fact that they're not necessarily interested in promotion doesn't mean that they're not interested in everything that's going on around them. I was conscious of this myself because I like working directly with people. And I once had the opportunity to go for promotion, which would have moved me out of the area that I was happiest working in. So I go for the promotion. And I think people saw me as not interested. And that wasn't the case at all.
No.
I wanted to work where I felt I got the most to give.
Yes. Yes. So it can be totally different, can't it? And that's where communication comes in and understanding why people make those decisions. What are the reasons? So I don't know if you were asked at that stage, but it would have been a good idea for somebody to ask you so that they understood that actually you felt you could give more in that area that you were working.
Yes, and I think really because I didn't feel that that had been appreciated, it made me keener to leave the organisation.
Oh, interesting.
And I think this is one of the reasons why a lot of women do leave, because they don't feel necessarily fully appreciated and understood. And I
Yeah.
think we can get that message out, and if organisations can understand that women aren't necessarily disinterested they are very interested in what they're doing, and they want to do a good job, but they're not necessarily wanting to climb the career ladder at that point.
Yeah, yeah. And I think you brought up two great points there as well. Humans love to be understood. We crave to be understood and we crave to be appreciated. We crave that recognition for what we're doing and how we're helping. And you give somebody that in the workplace as a manager, you're not managing people, you're understanding them, you're recognizing them for the power that they have and the input they're giving to that organization. My goodness, you're going to get so much more as an
Exactly.
organization for that.
Exactly. And that's
Brilliant.
the message that I want to get across. And I think what's stopping a lot of organizations and a lot of women being able to talk about this openly is facing embarrassment.
Mm,
And the way I do things, the way I talk to people, there's no embarrassment. It's just talking about the facts and
yeah,
about the issues that arise.
yeah,
So I want people, both women and those in organisations, if they go down the route that I like, there isn't going to be any embarrassment.
no. Fantastic. Well, that's good to know as well. And it shouldn't be an embarrassing thing because it's a natural thing.
Oh yeah.
And it's like you said at the beginning, it's very much more open now. A lot more people are talking about it. So that's a really good thing. Thank you so much, Margaret, for joining us
Yeah.
today, taking time out of your business. There will be another video showing up on screen. So do hop over there and I'll see you over there. And thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much, Margaret, for joining us. And we'll see you soon. Take care.
Thank you, Lucy.
You're welcome. Bye for now.
Bye.